Hey guys, Pete Volos here. Well, people asked me and questioned me recently, why would the governments and an elite agenda create a worldwide pandemic for a virus? Well, I point them to the same place I started, which was the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks. Would you believe it's been 20 years since 9/11 and the Twin Towers had collapsed? The anniversary of nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives on the morning of September 11, 2001. I remember being around the age of 10, ready to go to school. I put my uniform on and I sat in front of the TV, watching the mainstream news report on the devastation to hit New York. The fear being projected on the whole world, and still to this date, a terrorist attack, it had seemed. It was 10 years later, in 2012, where I came across some raw footage when I started questioning what was actually going on. It was the same year I graduated as an engineer with a bachelor's degree at the University of Technology, Sydney. One thing I knew without a doubt, being an engineer and studying structural engineering, what didn't make sense to me from what I'd learned was there was no way that two steel frame structures could free fall the way it did with such minimal damage and a local fire made to the top of both buildings. I then came across some footage of a third building that collapsed that day, World Trade Center Building 7, an adjacent lower tower which was never hit, which had localized fire caused by debris and had also collapsed to the ground. This put a big question mark on things for me and made me even more curious to look deeper into what actually had happened. The information and real-time stories that happened that day were quickly suppressed by the mainstream medias and news. Footage and stories were censored, though there was still some raw footage that is still around today that I'd like to share with you that might refresh your thoughts or may get you thinking again.
Yeah, what did we do? We made it outside, we made it about a block.
We made it at least two blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
So was it really caused by terrorists and Middle Eastern hijackers? Or was it planned by a global agenda, pushed by the US government? So who in their right mind would even think about doing that to their own country? Well, let's look at three scenarios.
Tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion.
Thousands of billions of dollars of US economic gain due to the invasion of Middle Eastern countries by harvesting their abundant oil supplies and resources. Money aside, has created added racism, separation, and religious bias against Muslims. Divide and conquer. It also created new counter-terrorism laws, which enabled harsher restrictions to be pushed worldwide on the people. In Australia, for example, 82 anti-terrorism laws have been enacted since 2001, and similarly to over 140 countries worldwide, which has enabled an increased rollout in surveillance with security, military, and police force.
And never forget what followed: Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, the destruction of nations, and the weaponization of civilian refugees. As the nation is preparing for the memorial of 9/11, never forget how the CIA and their media spin the lies.
And finally, create a fear response worldwide and test run to see how easily humans can be manipulated by a sequence of planned events. Exactly what we're seeing play out right now with the great COVID pandemic. I'm going to briefly talk about the three hit sites: Building 7, the two towers, and the Pentagon, and why the 9/11 reports and media pushed on society just don't make any sense. Let's start on the two Twin Towers. We were told that a plane collided with two fully steel frame structures, instigating a collapse, which was caused by jet fuel fire in which beams were melted. Never before has a steel frame truss building fully collapsed due to a fire, nor has it even until now. An example was the Windsor Tower, Madrid in 2005. There was a skyscraper still under construction that went up in flames. It was a huge torch that kept burning for 20 hours. 20 consecutive hours. but in the end, the load-bearing structure remained intact. The skyscraper did not fall.
Los Angeles, California, 1988. What was then called the first interstate bank building burned for 3.5 hours. No structural failure at all. In fact, an insurance company moved in, and today it's known as the Aon Center. In 2004, the Parque Central building in Caracas, Venezuela, the country's tallest building, burned for 17 hours. The facade was repaired, and it is in use today. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, One Meridian Plaza, 1991, burned for 18 hours. It stood. Beijing, China, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, burned for 6 hours in 2009. It stood. Chechnya's tallest building burned for 7 hours in April 2013. It stood. Dubai, Moscow, Zurich, and on and on. I was starting to see a trend. Fires don't melt steel or cause buildings to collapse.
In 9/11, the fire only affected the top part of the towers. The fire was dark red and the smoke was black, which meant the fire was starving of oxygen.
I don't know. When I looked down there, I didn't see flames. I just sensed that it was the right thing to go and try and test it. We would go as far as we could until we were stopped by flames. And when we came to the 78th floor, the last layer was standing, but it was cracked, and there were flames licking up the other side of the wall like this. It wasn't a roaring inferno. I sensed that the flames were maybe starved for oxygen right there, in the interior. We kept going, and we got onto the 74th floor. When we got down that far, normal conditions. The lights were on, fresh air coming up from below.
So the temperature inside the building was not particularly high, as we can see from the presence of this woman who is standing at the precise point where the plane impacted.
So if the building even had a chance to collapse, how did the entire building fall at almost free fall speed? A building at 400 meters has a free fall of about 8 seconds. It took 10 seconds for the south tower to fall down. Not even a bit of resistance of the undamaged structure below.
Free fall speed, that's impossible. That's a violation of the fundamental law of physics that says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Buildings just don't behave like that. If floors fall, they tend to fall and are braced by the floor directly beneath it. And there's some delay there. And then the next floor falls with 2 floors, and there's some more delay.
The buildings actually accelerated as they came down, meaning they were not getting resistance from these massive columns in the center of the core of this building. And when it's all finished, the outside walls from the lower floors are piled one on top of the other right in the middle of the building.
This was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid, and it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
It could have only fell due to a controlled demolition. There were many reports of multiple explosions from different people after the event. Some people in the building reported they were knocked around in the building during the explosions.
Barry Jennings, you were on the 8th floor, you work for the City Housing Department. Explain to me the moment of impact.
Well, me and Mr. Hesh, the Corporation Counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs, we made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. And I turned to Hesh, I said, this is it, we're dead. We're not going to make it out of here. I took a fire extinguisher and I bust the window out. That's when this gentleman here heard my cries for help. This gentleman right here, and he kept saying, stand by, somebody's coming to get you.
Underneath the damn thing, all right? Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You gotta get back from here.
All right.
Get back.
All right. Don't worry about me. You need to make calls right now. All right.
We're being pushed out as well because there was some concern that there might be additional explosions, possibly other bombs. There was also some talk about gas.
We hate to interrupt you. We've just been told A fourth explosion.
Now in the area of the World
Trade
Trade Centers, obviously neither tower is still standing. We don't know the source of this fourth explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
What about the sewers? Are they looking for bombs in sewers?
Horrible.
It's like hell. You don't want to know.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
planet probably?
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion. We was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole fucking thing blew. And we just collapsed on everybody inside the lobby.
Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary?
I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one was terrible. Then there was a third one too after that one.
people that understand. There may be more. Any one of these fucking buildings can blow up. This ain't done yet.
This is on top of this. It couldn't be no worse than this. Couldn't be nothing no more worse than this.
Close to the two towers was another building that was hit by the debris of one of the towers that collapsed. Building 7, a 47-story building, was never hit by an aeroplane, but came down 7 hours later at 5:20 p.m. This was something that needed to be looked at and not ignored. The fall was a symmetrical fall. This one was at free fall speed. You can't have something like that fall unless you create it. The World Trade Center 7 was known to hold critical CIA documentation.
Building 7 was no ordinary office building. It housed offices of the Department of Defense, CIA, IRS, and Secret Service. It also held files related to numerous Wall Street investigations, many of which were not backed up elsewhere.
And the building was made out of a welded structural steel frame structure from the outside, and the inner core was made out of a tube structure. After the collapse, despite the rush to remove the debris from Building 7, a group of engineers volunteering managed to secure a single piece of steel from Building 7 at ground zero. These were taken away for sampling. The pieces resembled, in their words, Swiss cheese. They said there was evidence of severe high temperature corrosion attack on the steel. This suggested that the temperatures in this region of the beam approached 1200 degrees Celsius. As it seems some of the beams had melted. This was unexplainable because the temperatures of the office fires should be approximately 600 degrees and were significantly lower than the temperatures as impacted on the beams. These tests conducted had shown that the melted beams had a liquid mixture containing iron, oxygen, sulfur, which is known to be used in explosives. Makes you question what happened, right?
Ask you this then.
You cannot say that any member of the Bush administration knew it was going to happen or wanted it to happen. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Ridiculous. Okay, let's talk about your BBC. I have a tape of a BBC reporter broadcasting directly back to England talking about a third building has collapsed. World Trade Center Building 7 talks for 7 minutes. All the while she's talking, World Trade Center Building 7 is still standing right behind her. It didn't fall for another half hour, yet they were doing a pre-broadcast back to England that, yes, it's true,
you need to
that
take
this
a break
building fell and it hadn't fallen yet.
According to the official story of the 11th of September at 9:37 a.m., American airline flight 757 crashed into the Pentagon. Pieces or evidence of the aircraft within the building was nowhere to be seen.
Outside the Pentagon, CNN's military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre. And Jamie, you got very close to where that plane went down.
That's right, Judy. A while ago, I walked right up to next to the building. Firefighters were still trying to put out the blaze. The fire, by the way, is still burning in some parts of the Pentagon. And I took a look at the huge gaping hole that's in the side of the Pentagon front. From my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate...
There was a distinct lack of visible airplane debris on the lawn in front of the building, and very little reported inside. Although a relatively few amount of scraps and plane parts were photographed, none have been positively identified as belonging to Flight 77 or tail number N644AA.
There was no airplane, not even plane wings. Did it break up against the wall of the Pentagon? If it was to do so, thousands of parts of the plane should have been scattered in the disaster zone. They have theorized that the vaporized theory had caused the aircraft to vaporize by the speed and force of the crash. So the supposed plane was known to create a 5 meter wide or 16 foot wide hole with a wingspan of over 38 meters and 14 meters high. To get this entire aircraft in a hole 5 meters wide, it sounds just a bit too far-fetched to me. Windows should have been smacked by the wind and impact, but they were all intact. So what hit the Pentagon? With all the evidence readily available at the Pentagon crash site, any unbiased rational investigator could only conclude that a Boeing 757 did not fly into the Pentagon. Since the Pentagon had over 50 different recordings of the incident, why didn't they show whole portions of the footage to the people that had doubts about it? Well, the FBI was immediately at the scene and took the surveillance tapes and confiscated all the videotapes of the Pentagon. Only one official footage was released where you could not see a plane in sight, but it was said that the plane was missed by the camera as it skipped from one frame to the next.
Jet engines don't emit white smoke. You have some white smoke would come out of the aft end of whatever kind of vehicle. Quite frankly, there's not enough in those photographs to tell exactly what it was, but you can tell what it wasn't. And it didn't have the size as compared, if it was a real 757-200, it would be much bigger than the vehicle we do see in the picture.
So 3 days after the attacks, the US government supposedly identified 4 of the hijackers that were on the flights. On the 12th of September, the Attorney General of the US, Mr. Ashcroft, declared the whole world one of the hijackers of the plane's passport had been found a few blocks from the ruins of Ground Zero, next to the Twin Towers. Even though they said everything in the towers had been burnt up and had been reduced to a fine dust. Doesn't make any sense. Did you also know Larry Silverstein, owner and developer of the 2 towers, made billions from insurance policies he set up on the World Trade Center complex just a few weeks before 9/11? He specifically took out insurance policies to cover terrorist attacks. We also heard Osama bin Laden was the world's most wanted man. But was he ever claimed to be part of the attack?
Osama bin Laden is the world's most wanted terrorist. Many to fight the bin Laden's terrorist organization Al-Qaeda.
And punish those responsible. Punish. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said wanted, dead or alive.
If you go to the FBI website, they've got Osama bin Laden. And if you go to Osama bin Laden's webpage on the FBI most wanted terrorist list, you find that he's been indicted for the 1998 attacks, but not for 9/11. And in fact, a number of journalists called up the FBI and said, well, look, why have you not connected bin Laden to 9/11? And they said, well, I'm afraid we just don't have the evidence.
Some say what happened on 9/11 was predicted by, you guessed it, The Simpsons. This episode was in 1997, 4 years before 9/11.
Oh, Homer, of course you'll have a bad impression of New York if you only focus on the pimps and the chuds.
Oh, I'd love to see New York. We could all go with the bus company's special Super Sitter fare.
$9? This one's on me.
Great! We're all going to New York.
I mean, The Simpsons do have a good track record. Oh, and is that Bart holding up a stack of money in front of the magazine? Some have speculated that the dollar bill also encodes unusual twin pillar Masonic symbolism. Might as well go a bit deeper. Let me show you this one. Not saying it's a big coincidence, but this might get some eyebrows raising. On the same day of the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush was at a school when he was told about the first tower attack. After the spelling of the words were complete, which included kite, kit, still, playing, must, sounded eerily similar to kite, hit, still, plane, must. The teacher had told the kids to grab the books under their seat, which looked like a bowing ritual as the news was then confirmed to the president. Check this out.
Get ready to read all these words on this page without making a mistake. Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready.
Kid.
Yes, kid. Sound it out. Get ready. Sound it out. Get ready. What word?
Pit.
Yes, pit. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready.
Seal.
What word?
Seal.
Yes, steel. Read these words the fast way. Get ready.
Play.
Yes, playing. Get ready.
Must.
Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready.
Kite.
Yes, kite. Get ready.
Kit.
Yes, kit. Get ready.
Steel.
Yes, steel. Get ready.
Plane.
Yes, plane. Get ready.
Must.
Yes, must. Open your book up to lesson 60 on page 153.
Mission accomplished.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there and didn't have much time to think about it.
Now wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day. So how could George Bush have seen what he said he saw?
If we're going to start questioning what's happening now in 2021 and how pure evil could be orchestrated by a global agenda to this caliber, then 9/11 will be the first place to start. I've seen so many people question 9/11 was bullshit. Then the same people go straight back into believing what is happening has not been infiltrated by the same agenda. The theories of no planes is something we can discuss at another time. But what feels right to you in terms of what happened? The stories we've been told. Was it a terrorist attack or was it not? Did planes actually hit the two buildings and cause them to collapse? What about the untouched Building 7? How did that fall? And the Pentagon, did a plane actually fly through it? And the biggest question of them all, did a controlled demolition bring these buildings down? And why? So I'll let you ponder on those questions. But one thing's for certain, it's been a far-stretched 20 years, and people are starting to question the narrative and what they're being told, seeing through all the noise and the lies. So I'll leave you with this. Be curious, have an open heart, and don't allow the tyranny to rule your life. If you like my video and my content, please like and share, and I'll be speaking to you soon. Peace out.
As we near the 20th anniversary of 9/11, never forget how thousands were killed and we were sold a lie from day one. If you still believe the story that Osama bin Laden directed 19 terrorists to hijack airplanes and destroy skyscrapers specifically designed to absorb airplane collisions, then I recommend you start with Architects and Engineers of 9/11 Truth. But for those of us who can see past the lies, let us never accept them again.